you went back to the cabin two more times, according to the timeline on your site. The first time you went back solo, correct?
Actually, Scott went back solo.
Oh, Scott went back solo. Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
you did after that, and then you went back together at some point.
No, I never, and I do regret never having spent solo time there. Prior to this trip, my big dream was to go solo entirely. And I realized after getting up there, like, that's just crazy. There are people that can do it. Clearly, there's people doing it now. I am not one of those people. It would be way too hard and kind of tragic because you're not sharing it with somebody else. You're seeing all these great things and you got no one to tell it to. I've made actually, I think 4 or 5 trips back, but only 2 of them had been with Scott, and each one was uniquely challenging. I mean, obviously, we're much older, and so that you're not 19 anymore, and you definitely feel it in your bones when you you go up there and do that level of work. But yeah, so I made 2 trips up there with him, and then three with some other people.
So in 2014, you went back to survey the land to build a new cabin.
That was the goal. Like so in 2007, we received word from a friend of ours who works for Manitoba Hydro. So he flies helicopters over this country often, and he called to let us know that there was a huge forest fire that ripped through that country and just decimated both of those cabins. So Scott and I returned in 2014 to kind of survey the land as best we could to see if there were maybe other opportunities, and also to just to kind of get some closure on the loss of our cabin. So we wanted to kind of see the remains of these things. So the trip was physically difficult and emotionally difficult. It was definitely was trying, for sure.
I saw some pictures. I'm one of those people that hates to have things taken away, and I just hope in some level that you guys find a way to put a cabin back there for other people to someday find. Or I like that idea. I've seen videos of people who find a cabin in the middle of nowhere and it helps them survive. I just like the idea of there being cabins out there in case.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe one day we'll be able to wrangle a crew and do something. The problem was, I mean, the forest fire ripped through there so severely that I mean it just decimated that area. So I think while there's still some standing trees, building it is certainly, at least in that area that we kind of have access to, I think it might be a while before we're able to do that. Now, you could always build some other type of structure, a tent cabin or something else, and that's something that would work. But there is something, at least in that environment, in that setting, there is something. I mean, it's like a log cabin is just kind of where it's at. It's like,
I agree.
A tent cabin works, but a log cabin, it feels right in that.
I mean, you found a whole bunch of clay and you can make bricks, but
yeah, right, exactly.
Sure. It's a log cabin land. Let's be fair. Like, that's what you want. That's what you have to see.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, a animal skin sort of tent of some sort.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
I want to first off, we have to talk about the other thing that came out of this trip. How many Eddie Bauer parkas with your name on it do you own?
I have one. I gave the other one to my dad, just given the fact that
beautiful.
It was his parka that I took up there, and I gave one to Scott. I gave one to Doc. Yeah, that was a real what a thrill that was to but when just as a backstory there, when I came home from this trip, I borrowed my dad's parka to take with me. And obviously, it goes without saying, by the time I got home, this thing was, it looked like it had been through a lawnmower and smelled horrendous. And I took a picture of myself in this parka, and I wrote Eddie, the president of Eddie Bauer, a letter. I said, look, this parka saved my life. And, the picture, it's just a mess, right? The parka. And I said, you're looking at a beautiful piece of gear. And I immediately got a response back from him. And he said, hey, if you send us this parka, we'd like to hang it in our archive room along with, equipment from other famous explorers and things like that. And we'll give you a new one in return. And I was like, yeah, it sounds great. And honestly, it was a little hard for me to part with this.
Sure.
So fast forward several years later, I get another call from Eddie Bauer, and they say, hey, we want to recreate this parka and sell it as part of our, they were running this one-time series they called their Legends series. And we want to sell this as the David Scott parka. And I mean, my head swelled up. I was so thrilled. I was,
Yes.
like, I finally got
And-
my Nike. I finally got my Nike shoe.
And you were in marketing too. They're like, we want to market
Yeah,
your
right,
name.
right.
You're like, absolutely.
I was very excited about it. It was very cool, and they did. They sold it. I think they sold it for, it was a limited series for like a year or maybe 2 years, something like that. So, yeah, it was a very cool thing.
That's amazing. That's that was the when I read about that, I'm like that it doesn't make it all worth it. What happened and what you learned is what made it all worth it. But that's a nice little, here you go.
Yeah.
What
Well,
you are
the thing that's so great too is my dad bought that parka. I think the same year I was born. So this parka was already 19 years old, and I brought that up there and I destroyed it. And so the story of this Eddie Bauer parka and our dealings with them, I guess, it involved him too. He was just as much a part of this story, and so it was special in that regard. We both got to share that when we went back, when they were kind of unveiling this new parka. I got to see the old one. They brought it out, and
we still had it. That's awesome.
and it was emotional. I mean, it was like we were both sitting there with this thing, and it was an emotional moment. It was profound. It was very cool. It was special.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely wonderful. I love it. I wanted to touch on you. Do you have any other plans for this story? Anything you want people to know about you? Anything they can click on? Paradise Creek. Is it paradisecreek.com? Josh normally has the link.
It's paradisecreekcabin.com. Yeah.
paradisecreekcabin.com. You could find out if the story's for you, get links to the book, see additional pictures, updates on the story. Check it out. I had a great time. I had a wonderful time reading your book, and I also had a wonderful time researching you and looking over the website. Thank you, Josh. And just learning about this whole thing. I learned about a part of Canada that I thought I knew a little bit of, but finding out what the land was really like was eye-opening. I did want to ask real quick, and did you run into any predators up there? In the book, it doesn't mention, you're too far for the polar bears, too far inland, I assume. Were there any other predators, wolves, bears, etc., that you had to deal with that were a problem, or just background?
Well, we really didn't know about Well, we weren't really sure, just because the nearest town for us was Churchill. It's about 120 miles away. Churchill is the polar bear capital of the world. And while no one had ever seen a polar bear that far inland, you still don't really know. So
Sure.
and polar
Only
bear or
takes one.
not, there's loads of black bear up there. Lots of wolves. I think and wolverines. I think those are probably the big three. I wasn't worried about a wolverine killing me necessarily, but definitely they destroy cabins. I mean, they just destroy them. So you always travel with we always traveled with a rifle, just I don't think they had. I don't think bear spray was even a thing at that point.
I don't
Uh,
think it
so
was. Yeah.
so yeah, traveling with a rifle was you just always had a rifle by your side. We and other groups that had gone up for shorter periods had just been overrun with bears. They were everywhere. A couple of the groups had shot a bear. We saw one bear the entire time, and it was like a fleeting glimpse of this thing. We had on more times that I can count, for example, at the Paradise Creek cabin in the river right in front of the cabin, there would be tracks of a wolf pack that had just crossed down the river. Never knew they were there. Never heard them. Never saw them. But you wake up in the morning and there's like half a dozen tracks, and
We had
it's
friends.
and it's exciting though. That's part of the thing that makes you love being up there. It's what obviously I would have much preferred to see them, but just knowing they're there, it's a pretty cool thing.
There was one other thing that you were scared of, and Josh put a note on my screen. Big fish. How big were those fish?
But there was one fish that we kind of gave this fish legendary status. And I can't recall. I believe that we caught this. We called him Old Grundy, and it was a pike, and it was a massive pike. And I seem to think that we caught it, and somehow it got away. But we got a good enough glimpse of it to see this prehistoric looking creature. So
Like scary.
anytime you go swimming in the river, you just think of that's the kind of shit that's in the water. These things with a lot of teeth, and they're you can't see them when you're swimming. So it's that Jaws scenario where your feet are kind of dangling in the water, and you're just waiting for something they kind of brush up against you. So weren't
When you were
necessarily.
telling So when
Go
you were
ahead.
telling the moose story, I literally had the Jaws scene in my face. That, like he comes out of the water, he backs up, cigarette falls out of his mouth. We're gonna need a bigger boat. Like
Yeah,
you're on a boat and this thing comes out of the water. Yeah,
exactly.
same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, scary stuff. One other creature, not scary. Pete.
Yes.
He appeared. Any other fun stories? Pete, a squirrel, right?
Pete was a pine squirrel that you know, for the most part, like we would trap mice, and because the cabin's a haven for anything. I mean,
It's a
it's
magnet for you.
loaded with food and it's nice and warm. So, but Pete was one of those that's for whatever reason he got a pass. We kind of gave him free reign, without like letting him, go crazy on food or whatever, but scraps of bread and things like that. And he just became kind of a mascot, for us. And it wasn't as though he was tame or docile, but you'd see him kind of come in and poke his head through his little channels, however it was he was pulling that off. So yeah, he was kind of a cool creature. The other one, actually there is one other animal, pine martens, which it's a weasel. It looks like a giant mink. They're fierce hunters, and there are a lot of them up there. And the first encounter that we had with one of them, we were both in the loft. We were sleeping, and you could hear something in there's kind of an extra room built onto the cabin. You could hear something rustling around in there, and it sounded big. And so I had the lantern, and I went down and I opened up the door that leads into this other space. And here was this marten, and it's this, when you see them, it's this cute little furry creature. And so we stared at each other for a minute, but then he charged at me, and I like fell backwards, and it kind of freaked me out, and I shut the door, and Scott told me, he goes, now he knows that now he owns us, because he knows that you're scared of him, and so he's going to take advantage of that. And luckily we didn't have any problems with him. But yeah, they bark, and they kind of they'll bark, and they kind of make these false charges, and then he kind of bolted at me, and I was like, whoa. And yeah, so luckily no other problems with anything else.
You painted a really good picture of what was going on. I just wondered if Pete was more of a pet as well. Because it seemed like it, I understood that, like, you no doubt had stuff trying to ingress on your cabin the whole time, but you're
Sure.
like, Pete's good. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
get that
yeah.
because you have to pick
Somehow he got a
one.
pass. Like and by the end of our trip, he was by far the fattest squirrel, probably in the entire North Woods. I mean, because he kind of had free reign. Again, we didn't let him just eat everything, but
Tear into stuff, but
yeah, but scraps and things like, yeah, sure, just give him to Pete and
good.
let him have them.
I hope he had stories that nobody believed. And then there was this delicious carb ball that was white and fluffy and baked.
Yeah, right,
But no, you didn't.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't
I
exist.
found this magical place. It's nice and warm, and there's all kinds of food, and the people that run it are great. Yeah.
Yeah, and the mice are like, he's not. They killed Fred.
Yeah, right. Yeah, don't believe a word he says.
I want to thank you. Is there anything you want to talk about or get out there? New videos or anything you're filming? Or if people want to find you, I want them to find you, or whatever you want them to see. This is your time to shine.
I think you've done an amazing job covering all the grounds. Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah,
thank you. I'm glad I could help. Again, I do recommend. This is it was a great book. It was a great read. It will clue you in if you have ideas of disappearing into the woods or want to know what it's like, or you're never going to do it, but you want to know what somebody else had to deal with. This is a great story. And if you read it on my recommendation, please let me know. And you can always get a hold of David Scott on his website and let him know what you thought about it as well. David Scott, or paradisecreekcabin.com. And that was just on the screen as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Scott, David Scott, for being here. I really love talking with you. I loved reading your work. Thank you for making this happen, and thank you for your time.
It was my pleasure, and I enjoyed it as well. It was great to be here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Everybody have a great night. Be safe out there. Enjoy. This has been The Real Story with Nathaniel. Josh, take us out. Have a great one. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Be safe out there. Treat each other well.